There is a silence that does not end when the message stops. It does not end when they pull away. It does not end when the screen goes dark. It does not end when they say they need space, or when they vanish behind that cold, careful version of themselves that acts like none of this touched them. Because some silences are empty, and some silences echo. If you have ever loved someone avoidant, you know the kind I mean. The kind that leaves you staring at your phone with your nervous system on fire. The kind that makes you replay every word, every glance, every moment they softened and then suddenly shut down. One day they were warm, open, almost there, and then the next they became unreachable. Not angry, not fully gone, just distant enough to make you question your own reality. And that is the wound, isn't it? Not just losing them, but losing them without a clean ending, without language, without something solid to hold. So you chased clarity. You explained more. You loved harder. You tried to become safer, softer, easier, less demanding, less emotional, less human. You thought if you could just say it the right way, at the right time, in the right tone, maybe they would stop running. But here is the brutal truth. The more you chased, the safer they felt leaving. Not because you were too much, not because your love was wrong, but because every time you reached for them in panic, you unknowingly removed the one thing they are secretly devastated by: your absence. That is the silence that stays in an avoidant's mind forever. Not the silence full of resentment, not the silence designed to punish, not the silence that screams, "Look what you did to me." The silence that haunts them is different. It is the silence of someone who finally stopped fighting for a place they had to beg to exist in. The silence of someone who felt everything and still chose themselves. The silence of someone who did not collapse when they were abandoned. The silence of someone who disappeared from the chase. That silence does something to them, because for the first time, they cannot organize you into a familiar pattern. Most avoidants know how to survive intensity. They know how to survive need. They know how to survive conflict, tears, repeated paragraphs, long emotional explanations, desperate last chances, dramatic endings, and the heavy gravity of a person who cannot let go. What they do not know how to survive is your regulated absence, your non-reactive silence, your grounded withdrawal, your refusal to keep proving your love to someone who only knows how to receive it in fragments.
Because when you stop chasing, they lose the mirror that kept their defenses intact. And now they have to hear themselves. This is the part most people misunderstand about avoidance. They think avoidants do not care, that they shut down because the bond meant nothing, that distance is proof of indifference. But that is too simple. And the truth is far more painful. They did not stop caring. They felt overwhelmed by caring. That closeness you offered, the consistency, the tenderness, the emotional availability, it did not just touch their heart. It touched the places inside them that learned a long time ago that closeness comes with danger. For someone with avoidant attachment, intimacy can activate the nervous system like a threat. Not because love is bad, but because love gets translated through old survival wiring. Their amygdala, the brain's alarm system, can read emotional closeness as loss of control. Vulnerability raises the internal volume, cortisol starts rising. Their body begins preparing for danger, even while part of them wants to stay. They may feel affection and panic in the same breath, desire and suffocation, longing and the urge to escape. That is why their behavior feels so contradictory. They move closer, then pull away. They open up, then go numb. They miss you, then ignore you. They think about you, then act like you were never there. It is not always manipulation. Sometimes it is nervous system self-protection wearing the mask of detachment. And then dopamine enters the pattern like a cruel little drug. Distance creates relief. Space lowers the pressure. Pulling away helps them regulate, at least temporarily, so the brain rewards the retreat. The moment they get distance, they can breathe again. They feel calmer, more themselves. And because they feel calmer away from intimacy, they confuse distance with truth. So they tell themselves a story. Maybe this isn't right. Maybe the feeling's faded. Maybe they just need freedom. Maybe you're too intense. Maybe they're better alone. But what they are often really feeling is this: I care, and that care is dysregulating me. That is why begging never works, because you are trying to reason with a defense system. And defenses do not surrender because they are loved beautifully. They surrender when the pattern that feeds them breaks. Let that sink in. You were never meant to win them by bleeding more. The silence that stays in an avoidance mind forever is not your pain on display. It is your peace. It is the moment they expect access to you and feel none. It is when they check for your energy and meet stillness. It is when the emotional door they assumed would always remain cracked open is finally closed. Not with violence, but with finality. And something inside them starts to spin. At first, they may feel relief. This is important to understand. When you stop reaching, an avoidant may initially feel lighter, less pressure, less guilt, less emotional demand pressing against their chest. They may distract themselves, work more, scroll more, talk to other people, become strangely productive. They may even seem happier. Do not be fooled by that stage. That is not healing. That is decompression. Because once the pressure of your pursuit disappears, the deeper experience begins. Silence removes the immediate stimulus, and in that absence, the truth gets louder. Now there is no text to react to, no emotion to defend against, no message to postpone, no invitation to dodge, no reassurance to take for granted. Now, there is only memory. And memory hits avoidance differently when it arrives after safety has been lost. That is when they start thinking about the softness in your voice the last time you tried not to cry, the way you looked at them when you still believed connection could be built, the tiny rituals they never appreciated enough, your good morning texts, your patience, your steadiness, the way you kept seeing the person beneath their walls, even when those walls cut you. And because you are no longer there offering warmth on demand, those memories do not soothe them. They ache. This is the part nobody tells you. Avoidants often feel the loss later. Not because they are monsters, not because they are playing games, but because their system can only process attachment once the immediate intensity is gone. While you are present, closeness feels engulfing. After you leave, the distance creates enough internal space for their real emotions to surface. And now, you enter their mind in fragments.
They are in the car, and a song finds them before they can defend themselves. They are lying in bed, and the room feels too quiet. They reach for their phone on instinct, not even consciously, just a reflex, just muscle memory, just the body remembering a place it used to go for contact. They see your name in their head before they admit it. They wonder whether you still think about them. They wonder if you hate them. They wonder if they misread everything. They wonder whether this time you are truly gone. And what disturbs them most is not simply missing you. It is realizing you may have survived them. That changes everything. Because as long as you were chasing, they held the psychological advantage. Even if they were confused, even if they were secretly affected, your pursuit protected them from the full weight of consequence. It told them the bond was still available, that they could retreat and still be remembered, that they could disappear and still be emotionally centered in your world. But once your silence becomes real, not strategic, not performative, but real, the entire dynamic flips. Now they are the one facing uncertainty. Now they are the ones scanning for signs. Now they are the one reading old conversations, revisiting your photos, hovering over your profile, checking whether your energy has moved on. Now they are the one dealing with the ache of not knowing if your softness has hardened into indifference. And that is unbearable for someone who built their identity around staying one step removed from emotional dependence. Because now, they are emotionally dependent on something they cannot control: your return. This is why true silence is powerful. Not because it manipulates them, not because it guarantees they come back, but because it reveals reality. Your silence shows them what your presence was worth. It forces them to meet the emotional bill after years of living on credit. But here is where many people ruin it. The moment the avoidant feels your absence, they often test the connection. A breadcrumb, a casual message, a random reaction, a late-night "hey," a vague check-in that says just enough to reopen the energetic door, but not enough to offer real accountability. And if you are still starving, you will mistake that crumb for transformation. You will pour your whole heart back into the tiny opening. You will answer fast. You will over-explain. You will make yourself available again before they have done the inner work required to hold you differently. And the pattern will reset. They will feel the pressure return. Their nervous system will tighten again. The old fear of enmeshment, expectation, vulnerability, and emotional responsibility will rise. And they will disappear all over again. Not because silence failed, but because you broke it before it changed you. That is the warning. The silence is not a technique. It is not a trick to make someone obsessed. If you use it as bait, they will feel the hook. And anything driven by hidden desperation still carries the same old energy. The silence that stays in an avoidant's mind forever only works when it becomes sacred to you. When it is no longer about controlling their response. When it is about ending your own self-abandonment. That is the shift. You stop using your voice to convince. You stop using your pain to prove your depth. You stop using access as currency. You stop auditioning for a love that only appears when it is about to leave. And instead, you become still. Not cold, still. Still enough to hear yourself again. Still enough to notice how much of your life was spent translating mixed signals into false hope. Still enough to feel the exhaustion in your body from carrying a connection that required you to betray your own needs in order to preserve it. You begin to realize something almost offensive in its simplicity. Love should not require emotional contortion. You should not have to become less expressive to be acceptable, less honest to seem safe, less affected to look attractive, less loving to avoid scaring someone who only knows how to love with one foot out the door. And the more you truly accept that, the more your silence changes texture. It is no longer filled with waiting. It is filled with reclamation. Now, when they think of you, they do not just remember your tenderness. They remember the moment your tenderness became unavailable to chaos. That is what lingers. That is what replays. Because deep down, most avoidants are not haunted by the people who chased them endlessly. Those people fit the script. Those people confirmed the old model of intimacy. One person pursues, one person withdraws, and the connection survives in imbalance. No. The ones they never forget are the ones who broke the script. The ones who loved deeply, saw clearly, and then left with their dignity intact. The ones who did not need to become cruel in order to become unreachable. The ones who made them feel, maybe for the first time, that real love had stood in front of them, and they could not stay open long enough to receive it. That realization can follow them for years, not always loudly. Sometimes it moves like a low ache under the surface of their life, a name they do not say, a face that visits at strange hours, a memory that returns when another connection fails, a quiet suspicion that they lost something irreplaceable because they confused safety with boredom, peace with emptiness, and emotional consistency with danger. And you need to hear this part with your whole body. Their regret is not your purpose. Do not build your life around being unforgettable to someone who could not hold you. Do not confuse being missed with being valued. Do not reduce your healing to whether they come back trembling under the weight of your absence. Because the deepest power of silence is not what it does to them. It is what it restores in you. For so long, maybe you measured your worth by how hard you could love someone who struggled to love you back in a steady way. Maybe you wore loyalty like a religion. Maybe you thought endurance made your love pure. Maybe you kept mistaking emotional suffering for emotional depth. But self-worth begins where overfunctioning ends. It begins the moment you realize that your heart is not a rehabilitation center for people who only visit when loneliness breaks through their defenses. It begins the moment you stop calling inconsistency complexity. The moment you stop romanticizing emotional unavailability as mystery. The moment you stop seeing your own anxiety as proof of passion and start recognizing it as a signal that your inner child is starving for safety. That version of you who begged for clarity, who checked their phone with shaking hands, who kept rereading the same messages, looking for hidden meaning, who accepted almost love because fully losing it felt worse than living inside it. That version of you deserves compassion, not shame. Never shame. They were trying to survive abandonment with the only tools they had. But you are not that version anymore. Now you know something deeper. You know that silence can be a boundary. Silence can be nervous system repair. Silence can be grief moving through the body without performance. Silence can be the sacred space where your identity stops revolving around who left and starts rooting itself in who you are. And when you reach that place, something almost unbelievable happens. You stop caring whether they are thinking about you, because you are finally thinking about yourself in the way you once begged them to. You become the one who stays, the one who does not disappear when things get hard, the one who does not abandon your own feelings to maintain proximity, the one who can hold your longing without obeying it, the one who can miss someone and still refuse to return to a dynamic that diminishes you. That is power. Not control over them, control over the part of you that once would have traded your peace for one more temporary moment of connection. So if you are in that silence now, if the room feels heavy, if your body still aches to reach out, if part of you is terrified that saying nothing means losing them forever, breathe. Maybe it does. But maybe what you are really losing is the addiction to being chosen inconsistently. Maybe what is dying is not love. Maybe what is dying is your attachment to instability. Maybe the silence feels so sharp because it is cutting you free from a pattern your heart confused with destiny. And if they do think about you, if your absence sits in them like unfinished music, if one day they feel the full weight of what your presence meant, let that belong to their journey. You do not need to witness it. You do not need to manage it. You do not need to answer every late realization with renewed access to your soul. Some people only understand your value in your absence. And sometimes the most self-respecting thing you can do is let absence be the teacher. Because the one silence that stays in an avoidance mind forever is not the silence of someone broken by them. It is the silence of someone who remembered their worth. Someone who stopped performing devotion for crumbs. Someone who stopped translating distance into potential. Someone who realized that being deeply loved by them was never the prize. Becoming deeply anchored in yourself was. And once you become that person, really become them, the game ends. The chasing ends. The confusion ends. The obsession ends. You are no longer standing outside someone else's locked door asking to be let in. You are walking home to yourself. And that is the kind of silence no one forgets.